Hi everyone. Hope everyone's having a good week. Tonight we're going to be talking about creative strategy. That's a large part of your assessment too. I know you're still finishing off assessment one over the coming week, but it's a good time for us to start talking about the importance of creative strategy, why it's so significant as part of the profession. By the end of tonight, I'll be teaching you how to articulate a really well-written, detailed and powerful creative strategy statement. You can use that as part of your assessment, and I think even as you sort of like get into the nitty-gritty of assessment one, you'll kind of be looking ahead to see how you might be able to use your insight as part of your creative strategy for assessment two anyway. So the first part of tonight, as I said, I'll be giving the lecture on creative strategy, and if we finish a little bit early, I think we might. We might have a quick break and then just to reset, and then I might just do a bit of a general Q&A about assessment one. I know some of you have sent me emails and so forth, but it might be a good opportunity for people to have a bit of a chat, ask questions, listen to what other people might ask. I think that's a really good thing to do. I tend to do it most semesters anyway. So if everyone's cool with that, that's what we do in the second half if there's any time left over. All right, let's get the here we are. All right, should be working now, hopefully. Find it. Working now. Yep, everyone can see my PowerPoints. Good stuff. Okay, so yep, as I said before, objective to understand the importance of creative strategy as the basis of all creative, of all copywriting. It's a kind of it's a myth that the creative comes first and foremost, and that as soon as we hear a brief, we just pull ideas out of the ether, just make stuff up on the spot. It's not. There's a lot of strategic thinking before we even bother thinking about how we're going to say something. Okay, strategy is what we need to say. Execution is how we'll actually say it. So a lot of the, it's the iceberg rule. You see an ad that might go for 30 seconds, but there's been months, weeks or months of strategizing and thinking about it before you actually get to see that ad, let alone the writing, redrafting, and then the production of the ad. So we'll be looking at different kinds of creative strategies. There's no one way to come up with an ad or come up with a creative answer, and there's no one way to articulate a creative strategy either. So I'll show you a bunch of different methods that you can choose, but I will also be showing you a creative strategy statement format that I teach the copywriting students, and most subjects that I have anything to do with at QUT or the creative strand tend to use this statement. It's a really good format, even if you don't go into copywriting or account planning. If you become an account manager or you work client side, you can actually articulate a pretty good creative brief, a really detailed creative brief from the creative strategy statement as well. So there's lots of benefits to learning how to use it. So as I said before, a strategy is finding out what you need to say. It's not the words and images of how you say it. That's our execution. Okay. So it's the stage after our fact gathering. It's an important part of our preparation stage of having an idea of our creative process. But we do it before the big idea. Why? Because it gives us our direction. There's every now and then you get what we call an open brief. That is when a client will say to you, I'll leave it up to you. You come, this is what, we need a TV ad. Let's see the magic. And I'll give you some examples of how that can actually go quite pear-shaped for the client and for the copywriter with open brief. So there's a great quote that I've always loved from Orson Welles, the writer and director. He said, the enemy of art is the absence of limitations. If you go too far outside what is known for people, they don't get the message. I guess he's talking about things, you know, that are too avant-garde or too abstract. People don't really get the sense of what you're trying to say. And if, of course, if an ad can be surreal and creative and bizarre, but if at the end of watching the ad, people don't understand what the ad is for or what the ad's saying, it's not really a good ad. So yeah, it's the roadmap for your advertisements, or I like to, you know, being a bit of a horror fan, I like the analogy, it's the skeleton for your monster creative, okay? So a skeleton gives you structure, right? If you haven't got a strong structure, then you've got a jellyfish, okay? Can't get off the table. So you've got a good strategic structure makes your monster creative really strong. And, you know, some people think, well, you know, creativity is about freedom. You're still free to be creative within it. If you think of strategy like a vessel to contain, you know, it's a glass or a jar, okay? It gives you structure. What you put in that jar is completely up to you. Okay, you can fill it with coins, you can fill it with sand, you can fill it with Lego. It doesn't really matter. That's the magic. But you've got a structure that tells you who we're saying things to, what we need to say to them, what's the tone of voice, for example. Yep, the definition of strategy, to give the dry version, it's skillful management in getting the better of an adversary or attaining an end. So it's inherently competitive. That's why you must understand what's going on with your competitors. It's no good just focusing on what the brand is doing, what the product is doing. You need to see what your competitors are doing as well, to see kind of how you can zig where they're zagging, so that you're not copying something that's already been done, and perhaps that if you can spot a hole in the marketplace, like the Tide ad did brilliantly. So it demands rationality. So the least important thing, really, unless you are a passionate consumer, you're an advocate for the product, is your opinion. It doesn't matter whether you like the product or not, okay, or you would ever use it or not. It's irrelevant. You've got to think on behalf of the person that does use the product or does love it. So it needs to have rationality. You need to be a little bit objective. But there's also danger in not being, you can be too passionate as well. You can be blinded by it. And quite often clients find this. They don't see their target market or the perception of the product the way that it actually is. You know, and that was the case for me when I was working client side at South Bank back in the 90s. This is before it had the great revamp, and it was just, they tried to, at the time, they tried to make it more upmarket or market it as something more, an upmarket destination. But at the time, pre-revamp, it was really a place for families who were going there to have a swim, have a picnic, BYO. It was thongs and board shorts, and that's about as dressed up as you ever got going down Grey Street. We tried to do this really sort of upmarket brand advertising in the 90s, and it just fell flat. It just wasn't working. I could have seen it coming a mile away, but the board just didn't want to hear that that the target market at the time was a little bit, you know, lower socioeconomic than what they wanted to bring. So you have to have truth in it as well. Also vision, you know, you do need vision. You need to see where, you know, what the ad's going to be doing in 6 days time, 6 weeks time, how's this going to impact on the brand down the track. And it also needs involvement from the creatives, involvement from the client, and of course involvement from the consumer, which is something we've been talking about the last few weeks. Different levels of strategy. I'm just going to pick Virgin because it's like a nice, easy, diverse company. So Virgin generally picks growth areas. They try to, you know, get on board in areas that they think are kind of interesting or youthful or a little bit edgy. They're not always successful, of course. So you probably know Virgin started off as, you know, in music, Virgin Records, and then it diversified into, well, we had insurance, we had credit cards, phones, mobile phone technology, Virgin Air travel, and of course now they're going for Virgin Galactic, the orbital tourism thing. So yeah, so they try to get into these different areas where they feel that they can trade upon their ability to be, I hate the word edgy, but I guess that's what they're looking for, cutting edge. Then they decide how the firm will compete in these areas to achieve competitive advantage. So if we look at, I know they've just gone bust or on the verge of going non-existent, Virgin Air. When they first started out, they were competing on price and service. So they were pretty no frills. They were a bit, you didn't get snacks initially when they all started out. You had to buy everything. But what they compensated for was a friendly service, and they had a kind of a quirky image that they've toned down a little bit after that as well. So that's how they competed against Qantas, who was their major competitor. They've recently kind of evened out a little bit, but they still kind of like push themselves on friendly service. I think that's their key advantage. But still price, it's still on price as well. The functional level strategy are those, what marcoms are we going to use? Which ones are our target market using? How often will we use it, etc. Our advertising strategies, their IMC strategies. And then our ad strategies determine the creative strategy or the message strategy. How often we use it. Are we using pulsing or continuous? What are our digital strategies? So an advertising strategy is the way you plan to sell the product, not the words and the pictures you use to sell it. I think I've said that before. It's what you say even before you found the right ways to actually say it. So it's the how-to. And if we look at our planning cycle, which you guys are looking at the moment, for assessment one, it's the where are we now, and that's concerned with the brief, and then our secondary and primary research. Where we want to be, there's our objectives of where we can be, and then how are we going to get there. There's our advertising strategy, which is composed of our creative strategy, our media strategy, and our digital strategy, although digital and media are kind of interwoven. All right, let's take a look at strategy and how it works. Okay, so strategy, as I said, is about being inherently competitive and zigging where our competitors are zagging. And I've used this kind of example before from Leo Burnett, when in the 50s and 60s, when everyone was going for the giant gas guzzlers in cars, Volkswagen decided to come up with the Bug, and his great idea was think small. When everyone else is saying buy big, go for big, bigger is better, Leo Burnett said, let's just go the opposite way, think small. Okay, and even when you're looking at the layout of that ad, it's showing the car is tiny. There's lots of white space around the car. So you're flicking through a magazine or a newspaper when every single ad has giant close-ups of the car. The bigger, the better. Let's show the headlights. Let's get right up showing the steering wheel, or the wheels, or the engine. Let's just show our tiny little car off in the corner. Okay, so even the design follows the strategy. That is, let's disrupt. Let's do exactly the opposite of what our consumers are doing strategically, conceptually, and even up to design-wise. But it all starts with the strategy as well. The strategy was to get the consumer to think small, to think that bigger is not necessarily better. All right. This kind of ties into what I've been saying to a couple of you who've been emailing me about the insight, and we've talked about this a little bit, that the insight doesn't just have to be about the brand, about the product. It can be, the insight can be about the consumer, or it could be about the way the consumer views a competitor. So that's because those three things compose our strategic triad. So the insight can come from some kind of belief, behavior, or feeling that the consumer has about themselves, the product, or the competitor. All right. So we analyze these three things: the consumer, the product, and the competition, and that gives us a pretty good overview of our strategy. So I'm going to give you a couple of different creative strategy methods. Again, you're quite welcome to use any of these, but I'm going to teach you, and I think the creative strategy worksheet or the creative strategy statement format is one that you won't go too far wrong with. But you are welcome to use these. These are all very valid. It really depends on the agency you work for, the company you work for. They'll have their own methods of articulating creative strategy or briefs, or writing ads if you're an agency. Every agency has a slight variation on the way they set out their ads. So what I try to teach at QUT here is kind of a universal template. I'll give you some options so you'll never go too far wrong. You'll always be able to adjust to the way the company actually does it. So a tool says this, this is a nice simple one. Who or what is our competition? Okay. And there you go. That's for that reason of disruption. Okay. What are they doing? How can we do it differently or better, or sabotage what they're doing by getting people to think about our competitors in a different way. Who are you talking to? There's our target market definition. Again, the more detail you can get into that with not just the psychographics, but sorry, the demographics, but psychographics, product usage, etc. And then finally, what do you want them to know, feel, or understand? Okay, so there's our statement of our key message, our benefit statement. All creative strategy tells us who the target is, what offer we have to put to them. Okay, so that's our key message. What evidence you have that the offer is worthwhile. So this ties into this concept of support. It's, you can make a claim, but people just don't have to believe it. So it's better if you can back it up in some way. And we'll look at the different ways that you can get people to believe your support statement in a second. And then finally, what's the final impression you want to leave? So we'd call this maybe our tone statement. Okay, how do you want us to think or feel once we've encountered the ad, once we've read it, once we've heard it, once we've seen it? So creative strategy tells us what to say only after we're certain. Should you concern yourself with how to say it? No one will remember anything what you need to remember anything unless what you say is memorable. Remember, the start of any sort of breakthrough in communication is to get attention. Unless someone's paying attention, they're not going to hear the rest of the message. So this is this idea of cutting through clutter. We're exposed to somewhere between 2,500, 3,000 different sales messages a day. We hardly remember any of them. It's a really competitive environment. Yep, and then the words can be enhanced by the form, word, style, impression. So here are some benefits of creative strategy, and I'll tell you a couple of horror stories from my own, or cautionary tales from my own career. It gives you a direction, and is not a device to restrict creativity. As I said before, absence of limitations is the enemy of art. It gives you something to go on. It tells you, well, who am I talking to? Rather than just pulling ideas out of the air, you've got structure. You know who you're talking to. If you can imagine your target market as someone that lives and breathes, and you can anticipate the words they use, or like the analogy I used in a previous lecture, if you could buy them a birthday present, if you know them that well, you could buy them a birthday present they would love, then you can write a good ad for them. Okay. Prevents hours of useless work and stops you going up creative blind alleys. And this is the perils of the open brief that I was telling you about before. And forgive me if I have mentioned this before, but this is just the biggest horror story I can think of my creative life was when I was doing the work for TAFE, and I came up with the Where Witch project. Have I told you that story before? Now I'm sounding like granddad, and I've forgotten. Have I told you that? Okay, well, obviously not. I'm not seeing anyone hearing it, but TAFE Queensland was one of my clients. I don't do as much for them anymore, but they were a pretty big client a couple of years ago. And at the time, they asked me to do a school leavers pack, right? So towards the end of each school year, different institutions send out these information packs to school leavers, and TAFE wanted to send one out, obviously to get people who are leaving school in grade 10, which is one of the options in Australia, or year 12, thinking of alternatives to just going to university, and going to TAFE was one of those. And it's a technical and further education college, for those of you who aren't familiar with the brand. They're a pretty big organization, a training organization in Australia. They do trades, carpentry, painting, lots of different things, by the way, but especially these days. But it's an alternative to university, basically. So they said to me, look, here's your open brief. It's school leavers, and that's all we're going to say. The rest you can come up with. So I went Yahoo, even knowing myself that the creative brief is a bit of a poisoned chalice. And so I was still strategic about it. I started to think about trying to think of some insights into school leavers. So I thought about myself when I was at high school, and my sister at the time was still in high school. So I was kind of like using her as a role model as well. And I know that one of the things that school kids do is that if you give them something to give to their parents, especially in high school, it rarely even makes it home. Okay, those of you who've been to high school might know if the school gave you something, it probably ended up in the bin on the way out. You turned it into a paper plane. It sat in the bottom of your school bag. So I thought, why is that? It's because they're boring, and they're authoritarian, and they're very corporate. So I thought, I want the kid to get something in their hands that instantly feels a little bit naughty and dangerous. I felt that's what high school was all about being a little bit naughty behind everyone's back, teachers, parents, and all that sort of stuff. You know, it's something. So I went for something a bit forbidden and taboo. And kind of going into it, I thought, well, when I was at high school, and also my sister, you know, we were kind of really into horror movies, and I've never stopped loving horror movies, of course, but I really liked them in high school. And kids would have sort of, we'd go over people's places and watch horror movies, and it became a bit of a rite of passage kind of thing to see if you watch the scariest thing. And my sister was doing that with her friends at the time. So all these sort of things congealed. And so I came up with this idea of coming up with a school leavers pack that was somehow tied into horror movies and rites of passage. And so I really honed in on that word rites, okay, as in like magical rites. So I thought, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create, because when you're an adolescent as well, you kind of want more power, right? You want more authority, you want to establish yourself. So I thought I'll create a spell book. This is what it's going to be. It's going to be this book that almost feels forbidden, this forbidden knowledge that will help you get ahead in life. And so I designed it like a witch's grimoire or a spell book. And it was called the Blair Witch Project, because I love the Blair Witch Project. So I figured out it's called, and inside it was, you know, where will you go when you leave school? Which institution will you go to? And the answer was, of course, TAFE. So I got very excited about this. I wrote the copy for the brochure. I wrote the TV ad. I wrote the radio ads. Spotify wasn't around then. This was the sort of like early 2000s. Ambient ads. I came up with a stack of stuff. And I must have put, I don't know, all up 14, 16 hours. And that probably doesn't include brainstorming and all that kind of stuff. And I sent it off to the client. The marketing manager loved it. Just thought, this is fantastic. We've never done anything like this before. And when it went to the board, they just nixed it straight away and said, this is peddling Satanism to teenagers. They couldn't see past it. Just, you know, sometimes clients want to do something different, but you give them something different and they fall back. So this is this idea of a blind alley. I was able, because I'm a freelancer, I was able to charge for every hour that I spent. So I got paid for everything. The client obviously didn't get anything out of it, because they had to pay 16 hours of professional fees for work they couldn't use because no one wanted to use it. They had to pay me because the brief is kind of your contract with the writer, okay? You're telling me, who's this ad for? What's the tone? What are the things I can? The strategy tells me what I can and cannot do. So if they had given me far more details, especially in that tonal statement, tone should be, if they wanted corporate or fun, great. Mine was kind of like, as I said, grim, sinister, naughty, temptation, those kinds of things. So if I created my own strategy, a good creative strategy or brief tells you what you can and what you shouldn't do. And in the end, I went for something a little bit more poppy and fun, and I can't even remember exactly what it was. It was a riff on some other kind of movie, an action movie or something like that. Now, they also learned from that as well, because I never, ever got an open brief after that. So I always got these very, very detailed briefs as a result. So now you might think, oh, well, you got paid, so shut up about it. But two things happen. When you do creative work, it can be exhausting, because you put a lot of yourself into it. It's like any kind of work, but because it's creative, you're actually engaging with it emotionally, imaginatively, as well as strategically. It can be very exhausting. So I couldn't bring that level of stuff to the next draft. I just couldn't do it. I kind of creatively exhausted myself. So there was no way I could bring myself up to that level for that. And I'd also had to put off jobs with other clients, because in came this job. I threw stuff around, and you know, people got their noses out of joint. So there's lots of run-on effects from this kind of stuff. So yeah, all in all, I enjoyed the writing at the time. I enjoyed getting the check, but really productively for everyone involved, for a smooth transition, a more secure creative strategy would have helped from the start. Also helps protect your work. Okay, so it makes it more difficult for the client to reject it for the wrong reasons. A lot of clients don't really get creative. They get the strategy. So if you use the strategy to explain why you had the drumming gorilla or the roller skating unicorn or the the witch's grimoire. If you could explain that, would have been good. So I didn't have a creative strategy to even show for my witch's grimoire. They kind of just got it cold. They didn't get it. They didn't get where I was coming from strategically, and so they couldn't see what the sense was creatively. So good creative strategy helps you justify your work to the client. It helps them, makes it harder for them to reject it for the wrong reasons. They might not understand it. They might not like that particular execution, but if you can actually say why it's right for the consumer, why it's right for their target audience, they'll often swing around to your point of view. Okay, so it also assures that our advertising is a direct outgrowth of the basic marketing strategies, that we're always staying on brand and true to the essence of that brand as well. And therefore, it's a long-term document that continues the brand image so that the brand stands for something in the consumer's mind, and something that's accurate and resonant as well. And as I said before, because it's inherently competitive, it helps you achieve that all-important distinction, if not originality, in the competitive market. So you're not doing exactly what other people have done. And as an example, I think we've discussed the Cadbury Gorilla ad. Have we watched and analyzed that in class? I think we have, haven't we? We haven't. Oh, okay. Maybe that's because I was thinking we're going to do that tonight. Okay, so I'll show you an example of strategy and then people copying the strategy for the wrong reasons, okay? And why you don't do it. I'll just stop this. All right, so I thought we had discussed this in class, so maybe I'm just going a bit mad in my middle age. Anyway, this is the Cadbury Gorilla advertisement from 2007, and it is one of those sort of watershed ads. So I think when we were looking at some of the ads earlier on in the semester, and I was saying that there was a lot of ads around 2007 that were really out there. This marked a real change in styles of advertising. We really embraced the style of advertising from the US and Europe. That's not to say all Australian ads were straight, but they were certainly a lot more surreal around this time. So this is when we saw the Commonwealth Bank ad, Dare to Be Different, the Michael Bay one, the Tui's dry ad with the guy with the quiff and the corn and all that kind of stuff. So we are seeing these really out there ads. This was one for Cadbury, and Cadbury for decades had gone the traditional route of just showing people eating the chocolate, enjoying the chocolate. In Australia, we had a guy called Professor Julius Sumner Miller when I was a kid, and he was like telling how there's the nutritious value of a glass and a half of milk in every Cadbury block. So it was all about nutrition and taste and all that kind of stuff. But after several decades, what more is there to say about chocolate? It's a leading brand. People know what it tastes like. And so Cadbury came out with this series of really interesting creative ads. So let's just take a look at it. If we haven't discussed the strategy of this before, I mean, it's quite fascinating. We'll take a look at what they did, why they did it, and then we'll look at an ad that ripped them off around the same time without really understanding what they were doing.
Well, I've been waiting for this moment for all my life.
pretty bizarre ad for chocolate, right? Tell me what you think was the strategy of the ad. What was some of the strategic thinking behind that ad? If you want, you can just activate your mic and speak, or you can type it in the chat. What do you think was some of the strategic thinking behind that ad? What were they trying to achieve?
Getting people to talk about.
Yep, absolutely. That is number one, and it's what we call it, the water cooler kind of thing. It's the same as with the Tui's Extra Dry. People watched it, probably turned to their flatmates and said, insert swear word there, is that. People were talking about it. It was being shared around the industry the next day. What is that ad about? All right. So what is that ad about? What do you think is what's the objective of that ad? Get people talking about it. That's one thing, but you can't just like talk about an ad. What else? Strategically, what do you think they were trying to achieve? Goes back to, you got to think about these things in emotional terms. What's it trying to make you feel?
Everybody does that air, just like the air drums, when that part of the song comes on. Everybody loves it, and I think they were trying to associate that good feeling that you get when you're like, yeah, this is the best bit of the song.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. That's right. It is it's meant to emotionally involve you with the ad, and that part of the song is very well chosen for that. Okay, so the whole thing is like, it just seems like it's this quirky ad where a gorilla drums to Phil Collins, and then it's chocolate at the end. What that actually does, it's very strategic the way that it carries you through it. Okay, so let's just type in the chat now. Tell me why you eat chocolate, and you'll see a little bit of method here. Okay, why do you eat chocolate? Taste. Yep. Comfort. Good. As a reward, keep the dementors away. Good. Like that, Anna. Good. Okay, now, all right. Now, just look what everyone's here. To fulfill emotional needs, as a reward, for comfort. Anna said to keep the dementors away, all right? So, yeah, it's like or boost, okay? So that could be an emotional pick-me-up. It could be a sugar level pick-me-up, a physical pick-me-up. What happens, what's the structure in that ad? We see this melancholy gorilla, okay? So for the first part of the ad, it's looking sad, Firstly, it intrigues us as well from a story point of view. Why is the gorilla sad, and why is Phil Collins playing over this image of the gorilla being sad? And then it moves towards this, this burst of joy. Okay, so and that is kind of it's the emotional journey of it's like to be in a kind of whether it's a physical downer or an emotional downer, and then you eat chocolate. That's what it's mirroring. Okay, so it works on two levels. Not only is it in a kind of abstract way, showing you what the process is of when you need chocolate and then having chocolate, it then associates it. As soon as you're getting that feeling of that warm glow or the happiness or that burst of excitement, then comes the logo, okay? And that's what advertising does. It creates associations and creates pathways between a logo and a brand or a product and an emotional state. That's really what advertising does best, okay? That's why music is so powerful, imagery is so powerful when aligning those two things. So we watch that ad, we feel down, a bit sad, and then we feel inspired, we feel happy, we feel energized. Okay, a little bit of a kick at the end, and then the logo comes up. So that's classic conditioning of us associating Cadbury with the journey from down to up, or inspiration, or fun, or happiness. Okay, look at the tagline for the campaign: a glass and a half full of joy. No longer about a glass and a half of milk. What does that mean? Okay, it's about joy. And so all their campaign after that was about joy. The kids with the dancing eyebrows, that was about joy. And again, it's an abstract way of showing you the effect of chocolate on you. The kids are being very good at school. You eat chocolate, you're bouncing off the walls, and it's done through their dancing eyebrows. So it's an abstraction of a real feeling or a real process that we go through. And then the idea is, yes, we go into a shop. We might be feeling down, or maybe we're feeling okay, but we're looking at, let's just say we're feeling down. What do I need for a pick-me-up? Or subconsciously, I saw that Cadbury ad the other night. I'm going to get the Cadbury and I'll eat that, and I'll feel the way I did when I watched that. again, these aren't conscious decisions, but these are the kind of things we implant into people's minds. And then the other way could be, you might be feeling completely okay, but you're thinking, I wouldn't mind some chocolate. You're looking around, and which one are you going to go for? Oh, the Cadbury, because that is the ad that I saw the other night, the interesting ad I was talking about with my friends, and just gave me that emotional kick. And at that time, Cadbury was, really top of its game as far as cut through with its advertising. Okay, now, so that's an interesting way of looking at of a strategic thinking behind a creative ad. That there's a lot going on beneath the surface. We watch it, we enjoy it, we like it, we feel something, but there's a lot of strategic thinking behind that. Now I'll show you a company. This is an Australian company. So this is this ad came to my attention thanks to the Gruen transfer, who we can thank for showing me the Ken Bruce ads. So this was also part of their Golden Turd, I think they were calling it, competition of the worst ads in Australia. So I put 2 and 2 together. After I watched this, I just went, wait a second, when was this made? So I checked it out. I saw it on the Gruen transfer a couple of years ago, but this ad is from around 2007, 2008, I think. So it was an old ad anyway, as was the Ken Bruce ad. But I kind of watched it and went, well, this is a bit familiar. So I checked it out, checked out the date, and then I kind of realized what had happened with the client. So let's just take a look. This is when a client tries to rip off a successful ad. They try to copy the strategy and the execution without realizing how it works for them.
You hungry? You want something to eat? I've got something for you. Here you go. Whoa! What? You want a souvlaki? Well, you'll have to impress me, monkey. Souvlaki. Souvlaki hut. You'll do anything to get one. Souvlaki hut.
Okay. All right. It's a terrible ad. You can see that it was made, that was, 2009. So they've obviously just gone, we need an ad. What's an ad that works? We're food, Cadbury's food, isn't it? They haven't really just thought about the strategy behind it. So they just copied it. I mean, what is it? It shows a melancholy gorilla at the start. And at the end of it, it's happily playing a musical instrument. And some food is involved, but they couldn't do the subtle thing that Cadbury did and just made it, well, that's a subconscious thing. They literally, made the gorilla start playing music in reaction to souvlaki. But the process is completely different. I don't know too many people that have the same sort of emotional journey from eating a souvlaki as with you eat a souvlaki because you're hungry, or maybe you're a bit drunk or hungover. I don't think the process is exactly the same with chocolate. You don't have that emotional connection or emotional or physical pick-me-up with souvlaki. And, it was just a cheap version. And that's the thing too. Have you got the ability to pull off that creative? I think it just comes off very cheap as a result. They haven't got the effects, the special effects, and the budget for the music that Cadbury had. It's a very small local business down in Melbourne, I think. So, you can just see these are the dangers of trying to copy something successful, trying to copy a strategy, and even worse, copying an execution without understanding whether it actually works for your business or not. They could possibly have gotten, look, they got some good exposure because, 10 years later it was on, Australia's worst ads. But, I don't know if it's the kind of exposure they want. Where's my... Oh, there it is. Sorry. All right. So this... you can't be successful with brilliant execution of the wrong strategy, but you may be moderately successful with a dull execution of the right strategy. Okay, they're great words to live by as an advertising professional. That is, something might be slick and polished and beautiful, but it doesn't mean it cuts through. And I might have used the analogy before. You can go and watch a $200 million Hollywood blockbuster, and you just kind of don't feel anything, and you've walked out of it and you forget it 2 days later. Then you might watch a small little independent movie, and it sticks with you. You can't stop thinking about it. Makes you cry. Lives with you. Recommend it to others. Okay, so it's got really nothing to do with the polish of the execution, and more to do with what it's actually saying. Does it connect with you in some way? All right, and we've seen before that the Ken Bruce ads are abysmally made, but they cut through. They do the job. Same with the Frank Walker Tile ads in Australia as well. So good copy strategy. It's clear and it's simple. Okay, so this is the important thing: the strategy and the key message and the single-minded proposition, which we'll get to over the coming weeks. And you're practicing doing that tonight in the tutes. They have to be clear and simple, but they have to be powerful as well. So it doesn't matter. Your advertising can be, as I said before, it can be absurd, it can be surreal, it can be really head-scratchingly creative, but there still has to be some sort of like clear, simple, powerful message that goes through it. Strategies devoid of executional considerations. The reason for that is this: we don't think about the idea while we're doing the strategy, because people tend to fall in love with ideas. Okay, and the trouble is you can fall in love with a bad idea, and if you love it, you'll push it through even though it doesn't really fit the strategy. So we try not to pollute our strategic thinking with creative, and it's inherently competitive. All right, so it's trying to achieve something over our competitors, and we're doing something different to what our competitors are doing, or we're trying to subvert or disrupt what they are doing as well. So our 4 parts to the creative strategy. So this is the method that I encourage you to try for your assessment. Sorry, I'm just going to go tell my son to be silent. Just hold on. I'll mute it so you don't have to hear my dad voice. Okay, I was joking. I haven't gone and said it. I'll be back in a second. There you go. I wanted to look mean, but what I said was, "Oh, you're a good boy. Just be a little bit quiet, okay?" It's all right. He's happy. Okay, so yeah, these are the kind of like this is the structure I'd like you to try for your assessment. I don't think you go too far wrong with this. Again, I don't mind if you use O'Toole's 3-point strategy or anything else, but I think this is probably the most easy to follow, in-depth and detailed way. I've been teaching this for quite a while at QT, and I haven't seen anyone go wrong with it anyway. So here are our 4 parts: our objective statement, our support statement, a statement of tone, and our brand character statement. So I'll run through all these, and then we'll look at a couple of ads, and then I'll give you a sample one. So yeah, the objective statement, it's a concise statement of the principal benefit offered by the product. So this is important. When we analyze, a product or a service, we have to understand all the different benefits. Okay, but we have to identify the principal benefit. Okay, so a breakfast cereal, it might be that it's high fiber, or it's it'll be ready microwaved in 90 seconds, or it might be that it's all natural organic ingredients. You've got to decide which one of those is most important to your consumer. You can have copy points about all of them in an ad, but you've got to build your idea around one central idea. So it's really about what is the most important thing, the most distinctive thing, the thing that you think is most meaningful to your target consumer. So it's the basic reason why consumers will buy the product in preference to our competition. So, for example, a Mac computer, or a MacBook, or a MacBook Pro, whatever it is, it's got lots and lots and lots of features and benefits. But you save that for the website. What do you build? Why is someone going to buy a Mac? Because it's easy to use, it's creative and fun. That's it. That's the principal benefit of using a Mac in simple terms, right? You're going to take up a lot of space if you're talking about every single feature. So yeah, it's not an analysis of all benefits, but a decision as to which benefits should be emphasized in our advertising. Okay, and now keep in mind too that benefits, remember, the trick is not to get confused between a feature and a benefit. The benefit is what is the advantage that the feature provides for someone. So the fact that it is that something might be low fat or low carb. That's a feature. The benefit is, you know, if you're trying to lose weight, or, you know, you can eat more and not get fat, or, you know, whatever it is, you got to put it into the, you can put it into the terms that is meaningful to the consumer. Okay. Remember, what's in it for me? What's the advantage or the benefit? What is the good that that feature does, or that product aspect does for the consumer? Okay, so finding out what that consumer needs, what do they most want in life, and what can the product actually do? There's your selling proposition. You know, if someone's looking for, you know, if the consumer needs novelty or adventure, and your product, you know, provides exciting holidays in Thailand, not that you can do that at the moment, but then you've kind of got a good selling proposition. So you would write it in a way like this, you know, our advertising will, so this is it's got to be an objective. Our advertising will convince, persuade, communicate, or inform. They're really valid things you can put for an objective statement, because that's the stuff that advertising does well. We convince people, we persuade, we communicate, or we inform. All right. The target consumer, and then you describe them, you know, and there's our three main areas: demographics, psychographics, and their product usage, that the product is, will, or provide, and then you write the benefit. So that might look like this. Our advertising will convince, as automatic dishwasher owners, okay, that's pretty basic. I put a little bit, you know, who are looking for, you know, who are fastidious about results, that Cascade provides virtually spotless end results. Okay, so that's a fairly clear, basic, objective statement. We know what the advertising has to achieve. When we're measuring and evaluating the campaign, if we do a post-campaign evaluation and, you know, the test consumers don't understand that it provides spotless results, then we failed. The objective has not been reached. Then we come to the support statement. So this is, you know, as I said before, you can claim to say or do, the product can say or do, can do anything, but you've got to back it up in some way. People are inherently cynical. Messages get out very quickly whether a product fails. And that's what they say about advertising. An ad can make you buy a bad product once. That's it. You know, it's up. You're the fool if you buy it twice. So the support statement is the reason that you can provide the benefit. Okay. So, when you are doing your strategy, take a look at your principal benefit. That'll tell you exactly what the support is. Can we believe that the product can provide that particular benefit? So yeah, it identifies a point of product distinctiveness or superiority that directly supports the consumer benefit statement claimed in the objective statement. So there's a few different things you could do. So you could say, you know, it's a reason why. So it's a product, fact, or combination of them. Why do we believe that, you know, Uncle Toby's, you know, oats are the fastest way to lower cholesterol? Okay. Well, because it's, you know, there could be some research that proves that oats is a superfood and it lowers cholesterol by 30%, or it could be the fact that, you know, it's the most finely desiccated oats, so it makes it faster to you know, twice as fast to cook as our competitors. So it could be a product fact, or it could be a permission to believe your product delivers a benefit in a new way. It's something to do with the image of the advertising. So we could say that, you know, maybe somewhere like Uncle Toby's is, you know, a traditional family-owned business that looks after its consumers' health, that kind of stuff. So you could say that. A lot of advertising is not about product facts, you know, a lot of, especially if you look at fashion or perfumes, ads for that don't really tell you any product facts. They don't talk about the ingredients or anything like that. It's really about creating an image that allows you to believe that the product will make you sexier, cooler, etc. They don't say that, you know, there's no scientific way to prove that it will make you 10% sexier or 10% cooler, but the ads, the imagery allows us to believe that it will do something, it will enhance you in some way. So look, that benefit, that support, it really should be unique or distinctive. The benefit plus the support must be a unique construct, okay, or at least distinctive. It should be something that's different from what the competition is doing. And this is the other thing too. When you read your creative strategy, if you could actually take out your your brand or your product and insert the name of any other competitors and the strategy still works, you've written a very generic strategy. And this is an adage that never fails to be proven true. Generic strategy leads to generic creative. Okay, so you have to have something specific, distinctive, and exciting in your strategy. If you don't have that, there's no way your creative is going to be exciting. Okay, I often write that on a lot of assignments. Generic strategy leads to generic creative, and I see it time and time again. Okay, so consider, is the support single-minded? Again, you don't want to get overly complex with this. Strategy has to be clear and simple. Multiple benefit strategies, of course, must be clearly superior to those that focus on a single benefit, but we must be able to have that single benefit, be able to push through in our strategy in the first place. Is your support clear, and do you feel you can sell the product with it? And then we come to our tone and brand character statements. So don't get these confused. A lot of people do. Tone is about the ad itself. Okay, how should the ad feel? How should we feel when we watch it? So try to think of some, they're short term to describing the ad. So an ad could be humorous or informative. It could be gritty. It could be nostalgic. That's describing the feel. Okay. How should you talk to your target audience? What's your selling attitude? It's important because we want to make sure that the advertisement has a tone, that it has an emotional quality, because that's what's going to connect with our viewer or our reader or our listener. And then the brand character statements are long-term and are about the brand. Okay, so what does the brand stand for? Try to imagine the brand as a human being and what are some qualities that it might have. So for example, an ad for Volkswagen, it might be a humorous ad. Humorous ads, have a lot of appeal, but you wouldn't say Volkswagen is a humorous brand. Okay, so it could be same with beer. You might say it's fun, bright, and humorous, but the brand itself might be classical, traditional, that kind of thing. So, they're two completely different things. Don't get them confused. All right, so our creative strategy statement, once you sort of write all these out in detail, you make a summation. Okay, so advertising will convince the target consumer, then you describe it that the product is, and you write the objective. Support will be, you write out your support statement. Tone will be, write down a couple of tonal words to describe it, and then character of the product is, and then write a statement for your product or your brand as well. So that might look like something like this if you write it out. Oh, sorry. My example is a little bit further away. I'll come back to it. I'll give you a full statement in a second. So here's some other ways to think about strategy as well. This is Charles Fraser's 7 strategic approaches. First is your generic strategy, and this is good if you're the dominant brand in a category. Okay, now the dominant brands don't acknowledge the little people. They make little or no claim of superiority. They don't acknowledge the competition. McDonald's never acknowledges Hungry Jack's in Australia, or Burger King as they're known in the States. Burger King acknowledges Hungry Jack's because their positioning statement is the burgers are better. And the unspoken word is they're better than McDonald's. That's what that slogan is actually saying. They don't never say it, but that's what that means. Okay. So Coke doesn't acknowledge Pepsi, but Pepsi does acknowledge Coke. Pepsi will every now and then do the Pepsi challenge where it gets people to drink Coke and Pepsi, blind taste test, which one do you like best. Their marketing strategy in the 90s was it's the choice of a new generation. That is saying that Coke is the choice of your parents and your grandparents. If you're young and you're cool, you drink Pepsi. So they are always acknowledging their position in the market, whereas Coke just doesn't blink an eye about it. And same with McDonald's. Preemptive claim. Is there something that hasn't yet been exploited by the competition and therefore appears unique? So that could be, when MacBook first came out, they were the world's thinnest notebook. They could claim that. They weren't after about 6 months or a year, but they could for a short amount of time. The world's thinnest notebook, and they sold a crap load of products based on that. So preemptive claim is also the strategy that Tide used. If it's clean, it's a Tide ad, because it's very smart. They just saw that no other washing detergent was claiming that if there's clean white clothes in a commercial, then it has to be their brand that's in it. It started to make people think and consider that every ad that you see is using their particular product. So it's very smart. USP, or the unique selling proposition, I guess this is kind of kind of ties back to the thing that hasn't been claimed. So a lasting competitive advantage or unique physical characteristic or benefit, that's probably the best example for the MacBook Air. But as I said, they're rare because a lot of products are homogenous, and of course there's lots of innovation within it. But if you do find something that is unique, that only your product or your service can claim, then use it, because it gives you ultimate distinction in the market. The brand image strategy, that is, as we were saying before, this is where your superiority is based on things, nothing to do with product features. It's to do with the brand image, the imagery, the music, our brand ambassadors. It all allows us to believe that this product is cooler, or it's more fashionable, or it's more prestigious. Okay. So that image is therefore nurtured by advertising itself. Product positioning, it gives a product a place in the mind of consumers relative to the competition. So Burgers Are Better at Hungry Jack's does that. We're better because we're flame grilled and we're fresh, better than all the the other fast food burgers. The resonance approach presents situations or emotions that evoke positive memory associations. So that's the the Cadbury Gorilla ad. Our resonance with the idea of what it's like to want, need, and then use chocolate. And then our effective strategy, which is purely emotional. Okay, so a lot of ads like Kmart uses this. It just shows the product and puts a jaunty ad over the top, people dancing around, makes us feel good about Kmart. There's nothing inherently fun or happy about Kmart. You don't see people actually dancing around Kmart when you walk in. But those ads lend us this feeling of an emotional attachment to the brand. Julian Simon, he has a completely different set of creative strategies. Again, these are for you to mix and match and use whatever you like. It's really just to demonstrate that there's no one way to approach it. Simon's idea is that, you can provide information, you can build an argument, as to why someone should use it. You can provide motivation with psychological appeals, again, such as the Cadbury Gorilla ad. Repeated assertion, you keep telling people something, they'll start to believe it. Sony is the one and only across everything else. Okay, Sony is, and for a while it was the one and only, it was the #1 electronics brand. You can command or direct people. You tell them to do something. Experience New Zealand today. Come to Queensland, that kind of stuff. You can command people to do something. Brand familiarization, again, repeated motifs and jingles and logos. Symbolic association, again, you could probably say that's also a strategy of the Cadbury Gorilla, associating music with an emotional state, or it could be to do with the Nike swoosh. Every time you see that, you start to associate it with victory and sport and achievement. Imitation, if you've ever seen an ad that is encouraging you to eat a product in a certain way, drink to celebrate a victory, smile at all your friends, it's starting to get you to associate that kind of behavior with the product. So if you use the product in that particular way, you'll get that benefit from it. Obligation. Okay. So this is kind of, a lot of our social advertising is about this, if you've seen all the ads for, Queensland, we've come through this, but, we need you to remain social distancing and do the right thing to get us through it. And then habit starting. Okay. So, getting people to, get into loyalty programs, or, switch brands. Okay, so there's different ways you can get people to ascribe to your message. Only over half only use 4 of Simon's strategies. So again, this is something we'll get to when we're also talking about creative techniques as well. These don't have to be mutually exclusive. You don't have to use just one. You can mix and match, and that's one of the ideas I want you to get your head around, is that you can be playful with this kind of stuff. Play around with all different types, mix and match these strategies to see which one works best. When ads had high noted scores, okay, that is that, they cut through and people notice them. 68% used information, 64 used argument, 56 used symbolic association. So it's kind of interesting that, you still need some kind of information to cut through. This is when we get to structuring our messages in a couple of weeks. Where a lot of messages fall down is they don't tell you, well, what do you want me to do about it? Okay, they might just show an image and a logo, but you don't get the impression of, well, do you want me to buy the product? Do I need to go somewhere? What do you want me to do next? Okay, so some kind of information parting at least gives us a direction and helps us lodge it in our mind what you want us to do about the ad. All right. Even in something as abstract as the Cadbury Gorilla ad, by the end of watching it, you kind of get the idea that if you eat the chocolate, you'll get joy. That's still some information imparted, even though it's very basic. In ads with red most scores, so it's people used argument. So it's convincing people, and there's right and wrong ways to use copy, which we'll see in a couple of weeks. All right. Fraser and Simon came up with these basic creative strategies together. So information, you just have a straightforward statement of fact, news or announcements. Argument uses logic to develop a reason why, a benefit or position. Now, when you use argument, even if it is a rational argument, you still need to include some kind of emotional appeal in there as well, which we'll get to in a couple of weeks. But as we've said before, humans aren't rational creatures. We're highly emotional. And so all forms of argument, all sorts of rational arguments still needs to have some kind of emotional content as well. If you look at any political ads, they're giving you they're trying to give you rational reasons to do it, but all the imagery, all the symbology, all of the music, the way the voiceover is delivered, it's meant to create an emotional reaction in you. Okay, either to love that political candidate or hate the opposition. Okay, they're all very, very structured like that. They seem to be rational on the outside, but they're highly emotive. Image-based strategies use that process of association to establish ID with the brand, identification with the lifestyle. Okay, so we often see, people in retirement villages visiting with, their grandkids are smiling and visiting all the time. They're kicking back at the pool, sunning themselves, enjoying great food. These are images that are associated with these retirement villages. Far removed from the reality, of course, if you've ever been to one of those places, but that's the image in which we sell it. Okay, I worked in a lot of real estate advertising for a while. I was doing a lot of work for an agency down the Gold Coast, and it's all image. Rarely do you actually show the apartments, or the majority of our ads were all about walking on the beach, playing golf. It's the stuff you associate with it. Here at I live at Hamilton on the north side. There's lots of advertising for the high-rise developments down on the river, and showing people in tuxedos and evening gowns, holding cocktails overlooking the river. I've never once seen someone in a tuxedo or an evening gown hanging over the it's not the reality, but people buy into an image because that's what people love. The possibility of what the product might bring them, not the reality. You can use an emotional strategy as well. So try to attempt to influence feelings or generate an affective response. I think, again, the Cadbury Gorilla ad does that nicely. Entertainment, it just grabs and holds our attention by being amusing and then presenting an interesting message. And I think that's what Aldi did when we looked at the Aldi campaigns last week. Showing the woman doing the ballet in the car park. It's interesting to see this woman doing this balletic sort of movement, and then it tells us that Aldi's one of the most satisfying supermarkets 4 years in a row. Even if it's a satisfactory experience, even if you've got to pay for a coin for your trolley. Okay, so standing out from the crowd, how do we actually do it? Okay, so every strategy has to be distinctive, and every differentiating strategy has these qualities. Well, it's credible. We have to believe it. You can't just claim it, you have to back it up. It's durable, that is, it's extendable into campaigns that can run for months or years. And it has a unique benefit, all right? And I've said before that the QUT University for the Real World strategy was just one of the greatest strategies, of the last few decades. There's no university can claim that phrase real world. We've kind of owned it. We were one of the first to acknowledge the idea of practicality and outcomes of employment. So when everyone else was going for, that education was all about enlightenment and bettering yourself, QUT came along and said, wait a second, the reality of things is that you want to get a job when you graduate, and that people want graduates who have been trained with the real world in mind. And so it was a fantastic strategy. They differentiated themselves, and other people have tried to copy it a little bit over the years, but they just can't, because we've got that distinctive claim on it. One of my friends is actually a director of television commercials, and he's done ads for Bond, University of Southern Queensland, UQ, pretty much everyone else. So he's sat in, and QET. He's done I don't know, maybe 30 or 40 different ads for QET. And he said everyone, when they're sitting on these brainstorming sessions, they all eventually start saying real world, and then they just kick themselves just because they can't use it. So yeah, we've got a really strong competitive advantage there. So yeah, it must be a unique benefit, or at least distinctive. As I've said before, unique is sometimes hard to find, but certainly distinctive. It's the benefit has to have meaning or resonance to the target group. It has to connect with them. It's got to be executable in advertising or another Marcom. So you've got to make sure that the strategy is something that can be externalized in some way. Okay, even if you say we want people to feel a certain way, you've got to think, well, can we portray the emotion or the feeling or the concept which you want us to execute. It should be, of course, be tied to emotion and feeling as well. So it should be related to a feeling, need, or desire in the target's mind. And of course, there should be consistency as well. Consistency with the perception of the brand. So this is why we do all these brand lettering exercises, where we have brand character statements, so that it's not going completely off brand for what the client stands for. Okay, here's another little way to think of the a strategic process is the Pisces method. I'll go through all these in a sec. So it's, we plan, we imagine, we select, we create, we evaluate, and then we start. Okay, so this is the process that I'll be taking you through over the next few weeks for your assessment as well. So in our planning stage, we establish commitment to the breakthrough ideas amongst key stakeholders, that is the client, the consumer, and the actual agency themselves. We identify essential elements in the advertising problem. We define the perspective of the product from the consumer, the client viewpoint, and then we agree on criteria for selecting those ideas. Next stage is our imagination stage, where we generate ideas of what defines the product, who the target is, what attributes or benefits of the product are, where the product or the service is offered, who the competition is, what the critical points are that create a difference between the product and the competition. And this is where we bring into play all of our techniques that we've been looking at from the last few weeks. So we do our pre-search, we brainstorm, we use our projective techniques, our photo sorting, our analogies, our brand obits and bios. This is where we dig deep into the consumer's mindset, or look deep into the and do that brand archaeology on the client to find out why they made the product in the first place, and bringing all these buried things out into the light, and start to combine them and look for patterns and motifs. Finally, then we select, we group and, no, it's not the final, one second last. We group and select those ideas so we can see all these connections. And this is a big part of ideation too. And we'll see this in a couple of weeks when I give you a couple of ideation exercises. But in fact, you did that for me last week when we were doing the free writing exercise. You were, for Jaffas, you were kind of finding these patterns and recurrent words. And those who did the Video Easy exercise in the Tute earlier, you also started to see these recurrent words and phrases that kept coming up that you were then able to put into your single-minded proposition. Those who are doing the later Tute, you'll get to do that a bit later. And then this provides us with that consensus on direction once we have distilled everything down. Then we have our creation phase. Based on the idea selected, we differentiate, we generate our differentiation strategy. And then we start, this is an example. I'll show you the morphological matrix. Again, this is idea generation techniques. But this is a way that you can approach coming up with divergent ideas that are all on a similar line. So a morphological matrix is kind of tied to a technique I'll show you in a couple of weeks, which is the 30, 50, 70, 100 boxes, which is about getting lots of ideas following a through line of thought. Okay, so I'll show you the morphological matrix. You can read about this in your own time. I'll show you a little bit of a video about it too. Where's the... There you go. Should be able to. Oh, maybe it's this one. Can't see whether I can't see the little green thing that tells me whether this is being shared or not. Can someone in chat just tell me whether you can see a morphological matrix with some EQ bars, a vinyl turntable? Can you see that? Okay, you can. Okay, yeah, I'm just not getting my little screen share green line around the page, so it's hard to tell. All right, so it's basically a grid, all right, and you put down different ideas in each square, and then you follow them along, okay, into different stages. So this is obviously for for a radio station, and so one of these is your EQ bars, and then just playing around with this. Okay, so you evolve from the EQ bar. Someone's had a bit of a play with the shape of that and turn it into like a skull or a face. This one's more of a friendly face. One, two, three, four, five, fifth one along. They've seen in the pattern something like a razor blade, so you could probably do something that it's sharp or it's cutting edge or something like that. And then over in the final one, they're starting to make things that look more like eyes, okay? Or they're trying to create a hybrid of the EQ bars and waveforms and records, which is something else they're known for. The next one down, they've decided another aspect of the business, okay? So actually looking at a stylus and a record, and then playing around with the shapes there. And as we go across, you see that as they're playing with it, they've started to realize that there could be, the letters J and G could be forming out of it. And then they've come up with the slogan, Just Go. So they start with something related and start abstracting it, and then starting to turning it into something concrete. This one, the idea of the drop, okay, so the needle drop. They've gone with a nuclear explosion, okay, that's the name of the business as well. And they've, again, taken the mushroom cloud idea, okay, for the drop, obviously dropping the bomb, and dropping the needle and so forth. And they've turned that into taking the mushroom cloud and hybridizing that with the EQ waves and with, the discs. So they're starting to play around with it. Different ways you can, create symbols or logos for it. And then the final one is hybridizing chords, because if you've ever been into, and sine waves, along with the mushroom cloud. So all different ways of exploring aspects of the brand or the product visually. So it's just attacking it from as many different ways as you can, coming up with random ideas and exploring with them and going down different paths. And then it's about combining them. So it's like, if you think of it like when you play with Lego, if you only got 2 or 3 Lego pieces, you're limited by what you can make. You combine it, if you've got hundreds of pieces, there's many different combinations you can have. So the more different avenues and aspects you explore, the better it can be. Now you can get fairly random with this. This morphological matrix for the drop is pretty structured. Like you can see that that they've picked elements that are to do with music and the brand and everything. But you can get pretty abstract with it. You can get almost totally random with it. And here's an example of how you might be able to use a morphological matrix if you're, say, writing a story. Okay. So it's kind of like a pretty handy tool. We use this in screenwriting as well. I get my students, I get them to write down 4 or 5 random things: characters, setting, props, locations, and then I mix it all up and use an app to randomly assign a combination, and then they have to write a scene or come up with a story idea from that. It shows a few things that you can take chaos and put it into order. It gives you structure, but you need something. You need elements to turn it into that. But the mind is built to turn something into a structured story. This is how we make meaning out of things. We make stories or myths out of it. So it's a really good tool. And as it said before at the start, you can do it in a kind of a random kind of way. If you're just writing a story for fun, using randomness of the matrix is fine. You use those elements. But as you saw with the drop before, it was fairly specific. It looked at specific elements associated with a music station, DJs, the EQ waves, the mushroom cloud logo, wires in the studio, and headphone cables and all that sort of stuff. So very specific stuff, but then it kind of went off into different areas. That's how I would normally approach it, if you're trying to think of ideas and symbols for your creative work. The Cadbury Gorilla ad could very well have been a random thing. So they're kind of thinking, they could have come up, the ad is going to have something, it's going to a gorilla, drums, sad music. That could be the thing. And then they kind of like created a story out of it. I'm not saying that's how they came up with it, but you can see that that kind of idea could be generated from a morphological matrix in that way. Then, that could have been one of 20 ideas, but that one best suited the brief or the strategy. Oops. All right, then finally, our last phase, as always, is no, sorry, this is the second last phase. Is is about evaluating, okay, assessing the idea. Is it the right one? Is there a better idea? Can we improve it? So then the target, oops, sorry. Oh, Jesus. Yep, the target audience focus groups defines the criteria that cause them to want to have the product. And then, yeah, we use that as a custom guide for a focus group to develop the study to see if we've met the objectives. And then finally, we actually start. So we create our action plan to implement our creative positioning, what's going to be done, who will do it, how it will be done, and when. So there's our division of labor, what tasks need to be done, and our timeline and guidelines for delivering for a campaign. This is this is a definition of strategy by Richard Lyons in his book Guts. Again, it's very over the top, but I'll take you through it, and then let's pull apart the stuff that is important to know when you're writing your strategy. So Lyons says, strategy is a carefully designed plan to murder the competition. Any premise that lacks a killer instinct isn't a strategy. Any premise that doesn't reflect or include a consumer's crying need is not a strategy. Any premise embalmed in stiff, predictable language is not a strategy. Any premise that addresses the whole world, women 3 to 93, is not a strategy. Any premise interchangeable with that of another product is not a strategy. All right, so it's fairly over the top, but I do love it just because the guy's obviously passionate about it. It's a little bit crazy sounding. Let's pull apart the elements that you need to think about. Well, firstly, it's carefully designed. It's methodical. It's meticulous, and to murder the competition. That is, that's what we're doing is commercial creativity. So it has to have a commercial outcome. We have to do something better than the competition. Sell more, get more people coming to our gym or our university or voting for our political party. Any premise that lacks a killer instinct is not a strategy. So this is important. Don't separate. Don't think that strategy has to be less important or less exciting than your creative, because good strategy actually gets you excited for the creative. When you get the strategy, that's where your first light bulb moment. You feel this is right. This is really strong. We haven't seen this done before. This can actually work strategically, and that gets you excited about your creativity. If you're bored by your strategy, if you're not excited by your strategy, something wrong, and you're probably not going to get excited by your creative either. Any premise that doesn't reflect or include a consumer's crying need is not a strategy, and this is why we start with analysis of our consumers. What are their basic needs, fears, desires? Can this product actually do something for them in that regard? Any premise embalmed in stiff, predictable language is not a strategy. Again, if it sounds generic, if it sounds soulless, your creative will be exactly the same. Any premise that addresses the whole world, women 3 to 93, is not a strategy. Again, you need to have it narrow, specific, targeting a particular person, talking to them, in their language, and that starts with defining who these people are. Any premise interchangeable with that or another product is not a strategy. Again, this goes back to the idea of generic strategy leads to generic creative as well. So as I said before, if you can look at your strategy and swap one of the competitors out and it still works, it's not a strong strategy. You've just copied what anyone else could possibly do or say. DDB Needham's creative strategy method is just focusing on a basic human need or appeal. So their theory is that any product, service, idea, or institution can be marketed along these lines. A sense of belonging. Now, that could be for a social club, or it could be a sense of belonging to a family, or being accepted amongst a group of mates. So lots of different products could fall into that. Of feeling attractive and wanted. Of obtaining material things, of enjoying life, creating a happy family situation, to have love and sex, to have power, or to avoid fear. Okay, so for the Cadbury Gorilla one, what was that one? Which one of DDB Needham's basic human needs?
Enjoy life.
Yes, I think that would be absolutely right. That would be that one. What about the QUT's University for the Real World campaign? What's that one? I guess there's a few different things going on there. You want to have a job to obtain material things, I guess, or to have power. You know, I guess it could work in a few different ways to avoid fear that you're going to go through university for 3 years and come out and not have a job. Okay, so you could work on those ways as well. So yeah, I said before that, you know, it doesn't matter whether you have a rational argument for something, you've got to look at the emotional aspects as well. So if you take something like deli style low fat potato chips, 75% less saturated fat, you know, you could think, you know, what would you say about this product to mothers? Okay, so for them, it's buying some snacks for their kids that they can feel less guilty about. For teenagers, maybe it's to do with the idea of maybe it's body consciousness, or maybe it's to do with their skin. So there's two completely different aspects of promoting it for the same product. For fitness freaks, well, again, yeah, maybe they're staying in shape, and it's like it's a low guilt snack in between workouts. Or for older people, it's more to do with not dying, you know, not clogging your arteries as much. So same product, but the mix of emotional and rational appeals can be differed and calibrated for a particular market. Okay, but they all work on those different things. One is feeling good about the way you're raising your kids. The other one is feeling good about, you know, you're doing something good for your skin. The other one is feeling that you're not cheating on your exercise regime. The other one is you're not going to die. Okay, so same product, but different appeals or different angles. Here's another way of looking at, you know, a creative strategy that is getting in the mind of a consumer. Again, this just like the creative strategy worksheet, this forms a pretty decent brief as well. And this is the way, you know, McCann Erickson gets their writers to fill out their strategy. Get into the mind of your consumer or customer. Who is our customer? Okay, there's our target market definition. Where are we now in the mind of the customer? There's our positioning statement. Where's our competition in his or her mind? Again, what did I say is constant in all creative strategies? Who are we talking to? Who's the competition? What offer do we have to put to them? What's the tone or feel of the ad? What's our promise? So there's our offer. What's the supporting evidence? What is the tone of voice for the advertising? Okay, so that makes a pretty good brief. Really good creative strategy, just worded slightly differently. And again, if you want to put that as a way to articulate yours, I'm not going to freak out too much because it is a pretty decent one. Saatchi and Saatchi, I love this saying, don't tell me about your manure, tell me about my flowers. And this goes back to that concept of what's in it for me, okay? WIFFM, what's in it for me? Always keep in mind, what does the consumer want from your ad? So yeah, strong emotion is the critical underpinning of any brand, and it's the job of the creatives to raise the pulse rate. And simplicity is the best clutter cutter, okay? So there's Mojo and other agencies, KISS principle, keep it simple, stupid. Look, I won't go into the FCB grid. I personally think it's fairly old-fashioned. It's still used a little bit, but I think it leads to pretty generic creative. Most of you probably would have studied it before anyway. I like Bernstein's VIPS. It's a great little acronym that, again, is nice and simple. So all great ads should have these qualities. Visibility, okay? It's be different, be noticed, but relevant. So Leo Burnett's sock comes from one of his famous sayings, which was, I can get attention by having a man come down, you know, enter a room with a sock in his mouth, but unless that sock is somehow relevant to the brand of the consumer, it's a stupid ad, okay? It's a useless ad. So yeah, visibility, identity. Make sure the consumer not only remembers the commercial, but also the brand. And we've talked about that phenomenon before, that sometimes people like an ad and they'll remember the imagery or the song, but they can't remember the brand. And that's not a very effective ad. It's a nice piece of entertainment, not an effective ad. A promise, there must be a core promise inherent in the ad. What's in it for me? So carrots are low in calories and they're good for you. Now I understand why I need to eat carrots. Simplicity, make your point, stay on target, progress logically from start to finish. So there's, you know, you can use that as a checklist for your own strategy. Does it make the product visible? Is it standing out? Is it distinctive? Does it register the identity strongly? Does it contain an inherent promise to the consumer that's believable and meaningful and powerful? And is there simplicity in it as well? And this is a pretty easy one. This is Doug Walker from DDB Needham, just says, you know, all good creative strategies should contain these three basic things. Relevance, that it must be relevant to the target market's lifestyle, needs, wants, fears. It should be original or distinctive to stand out from the clutter, and it must have some kind of impact and memorability. Each agency has its own format to write creative strategy, as I said before, in the same way they have their own format to actually write ads. So there's no right or wrong model. Just really think about what they have in common. I've gone through those a couple of times. So here's a creative strategy statement that I made earlier just to kind of show you the way you could articulate this. This is for L'Oreal's Glow in the Dark Nail Polish. Who's our target? Girls 8 to 15 years who care about their appearance. They're regular users of nail polish who like to be the first with something new. They're trendsetters rather than followers. Okay, so it's nice and simple. It shows us demographics, psychographics, product use. It lets me know who I'm writing this ad for. Where are we now in the mind of this person? Our target market is unaware that a new kind of glow-in-the-dark nail polish is now available from L'Oreal. That's great to me because I now know that we need to inform them about it and that we can use an appeal like novelty or something like that. Where's our competition in the mind of our target? None of the competing brands have a glow-in-the-dark nail polish, however, glitter and other special effects are on the market. We're also competing with other makeup products they spend their money on. Okay, so we know that we have to really push this novelty aspect. Where would we like to be in the mind of this person? The product will be positioned as the only nail polish that glows in the dark and glitters in the sunlight. Like I said, that's got to come across somehow. What's our promise? It will make the person stand out from the crowd and will make her looking funky and special, although you would never use those words in an ad. I don't think anyone wants to hear, our nail polish will make you look funky and special. That's wrong on many levels. So it's the language of the brief is sometimes, or the strategy is sometimes you've got to move away from that and turn it into the words that are meaningful to the consumer. So what's the supporting evidence? Why will we believe that it will help them stand out from the crowd? Because it comes in 10 different shades. It will always match their outfit. It contains phosphorescence that makes it glow in the dark and glitter in the sunshine. So that's something we could put into the actual ads. What's the tone of voice of the advertising? It needs an advertisement that stands out too. So the tone should be hip, exciting, fun, appealing to our young target audience. And of course, you would never use the word hip to the target audience of 8 to 15-year-olds. They don't know what that means. So you need to turn it into something. And don't say to someone, it's exciting and fun. That's like telling someone, wear this, it's cool. You've got to make people believe it. Don't tell people that. Make them believe it themselves. And then once you've written out your creative strategy statement, your creative strategy worksheet, you summarize it in one sentence. So it's nice and condensed. It's our takeaway package. So that, as we saw before, our creative strategy summarizes this. Advertising will convince girls aged 8 to 15 that L'Oreal Glow in the Dark is much more fun than the average nail polish because it glitters in the sunlight and glows in the dark. Support will be that the nail polish comes in 10 different shades and contains phosphorescence. Tone of the advertising will be fun and exciting. Now, why do we do this after writing out all that beautiful worksheet? Well, that's because some of these creative strategies can go for a long time. They can go for 5, 10 pages. Some of them are really thick. All I want to know is, after I've read it all, is what do I need to remember? And so as I'm writing that, I'll keep looking back at the creative strategy. So at a glance, I know, who am I writing this for? What do I need to say? Why will they believe it? What's the tone of voice I need to use? So, that I'm sticking to that strategy. All right. Just to finish off, I just want to show you a couple of ads that caught my eye this week. I'll just show one, so maybe we'll use our remaining time for a bit of a Q&A. But this is a really interesting ad. Again, it took me probably 1 or 2 watches to kind of get it. I'd seen it and I wasn't 100% sure. I thought maybe my mind just wasn't dirty enough. I'm off my game. All right, so here we are. So this is an ad for Bond's turtlenecks and crew necks. So it's an interesting idea. So a lot of people think, underwear is homogenous, guys just wear whatever. But Bonds have really thought about this for this campaign and thought, well, no one's really acknowledging, or it's one of those unspoken words. We talked about this in previous weeks. What's the unspoken thing in a brand category or about a product that no one ever talks about? Okay. It is, for this campaign, is, I guess, that guys fall into 2 camps when they're wearing the underwear. They're the guys who are the turtlenecks and the crew necks. And that is, guys who are circumcised and uncircumcised, that their experience in underwear is completely different based on which camp they fall into. So Bonds have seized on this and said, well, let's make underwear that suits those two camps. So whether you're a turtleneck or a crew neck, whether you're circumcised or uncircumcised, this is going to we make underwear that suits your particular situation. So this is the ad they came up with, and I think they did it in a really clever way that is tasteful and funny, and gets their point across in a fairly subtle, humorous way. So you have to say we'll watch it, and then we'll talk about what I think would be the creative strategy in terms of the creative strategy statement. Oh, wait a second. It says screen sharing has stopped. Okay, you should be able to see it now, right? Okay, let's play it.
Hey, nice crew neck.
Thank you.
My dad has a crew neck.
Guess we don't see many these days.
Back in my day, they were everywhere. Good on you for getting your neck out there, you know. Why hide it?
Hey, bro, my son has a turtleneck, so our necks look different. It's no problem. I sometimes worry it makes my neck look small.
No, that looks big. Did you ever have a turtleneck? Or?
Oh, yeah, of course, when I was a boy. Yeah, but my parents, you know.
Oh.
But I'm comfortable. How about you guys?
Yeah.
Comfy.
Comfy.
Yeah.
Comfy.
All right.
Hey.
Very clever way. You have to say the creative strategy statement might be something like this: advertising will convince men who are looking for comfortable underwear that Bonds designs underwear for both circumcised and uncircumcised men. Support will be the fact that, I don't know what the actual product facts are there. I don't exactly know what the positioning is there. And support will be the fact that Bonds is known for creating comfortable undies for Australian men. Tone of the ad is humorous. Brand character of Bonds is comfortable and Australian. Okay, so that could, if you're working backwards from that, the copywriter would get that. No, well, okay, who's my target market? It's Australian men. What do I have to say to them that, Bonds Undies makes comfortable undies, whether you're circumcised or uncircumcised. Support, or the reason they'll believe it, is that Bonds is well known for creating comfy undies for Australian men for generations. Because there was no actual product facts there. I guess that's something you're allowing. It's a permission to believe based on the brand. Tone of the ad is humorous. Brand character is, comfortable, Australian, traditional, that kind of stuff. So all of those things are in that ad, but that's the strategy behind it. But the execution is, humorous and funny and quirky. Okay. And kind of a little bit sort of, you got to read between the lines, because of course no one wants them to use actual words or get too literal about it. So I thought it was a clever way of doing it. Okay, so just to finish off, any questions about the assignment? Assignment 1, anyone would like to ask? Some people have been sending me emails.
Yeah, hi, sorry.
Hello.
Hi, I just want to ask, because I have searched some information about the brand, the brand. So I actually can't get enough information about the brand. So can you offer me some advice for how to search, or how can I get more information?
Well, the thing is, it's a fairly new company. There's not much out there, but that's the thing. Your idea, the brand is only one aspect of it. So you just tell me whatever you can find out about them. So you've got to look beyond the brand. So the brand is one aspect of the assignment. The rest is the target consumer, the competition, social enterprise, and philanthropic marketing. That's all part of it as well. So the brand is only one part. So they haven't done much. They've only got a couple of projects. They've got a small amount of news stories. So you need to mine all that, but you've got to go beyond that.
Yeah, they said they offer some donation for the essential workers working COVID-19 situation. So is that the detailed events we need to like? So the target audience is the essential workers, right?
No, the target audience isn't. The target audience are people who feel that they should, for that particular campaign, is people who enjoy craft beer but want to buy craft beer knowing that the money they spend on it is going to help essential workers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's.
I'm sure essential workers can use a beer at the moment, but the target market. So, for example, the Great Barrier Beer, the target isn't the Great Barrier Reef. Then it doesn't drink beer, as far as I know. But so you've got to think, well, who's the target? It's the person who's going to buy the beer, so that if you're spending money on premium beer, which is expensive, at least a little bit of that money goes towards it. So you got to think less about the product apart from the fact that it's a craft beer. And why do people drink craft beer over normal beer, or drink it over water, or anything else? So that's a particular aspect of the target market. But what makes them different from every other craft beer is their philanthropic angle. So that's the two parts to your target market. They enjoy craft beer, but they're going to buy this one because it will go towards helping some cause.
Oh, it's like make people feel that if you buy this beer, you are helping some essential workers.
Correct.
Something like that.
Correct.
Oh, okay. Correct. Yeah, that makes sense anyway.
Yeah. So that's the idea. So your idea is you eventually step towards part two, and this is your insight too. You have a think about what is an insight about the way the target market thinks about themselves, or some sort of social cause, or the competitive brands, because you're going to start building a campaign for their next beer, whatever that might be. Okay. So, this is where you're going to build it up. So the insight you might have is not necessarily about the COVID, the essential workers campaign. It could be more about the person who's buying these beers in general, or the craft beer person, who is socially minded. But what's the next cause we could look into? What is something new and fresh about the target market that the client doesn't know yet, that we can tell them that they might be able to use in their next campaign?
Okay, so the insight, so the customer insight is for like how to organizing this whole thing, right?
The customer insight is tell me what is something that is unique and distinctive about the way the target consumer thinks or feels about the product, brand category, themselves, or the competition. Okay. So for example, in the Bonds ad, the insight is that not all men are the same downstairs. Some men are circumcised, some are uncircumcised. And so their experience in wearing underpants is different as a result. So they've designed underwear for both kinds. So that's the brand growth ideas, but the insight is that, which is obvious, but no one's really thought about it before, but Bonds have thought about it.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So, the insight, say for the, what's another example then? Say the Cadbury Gorilla ad, because we use that one tonight quite a bit. Okay, so the insight is that people don't eat chocolate simply for taste or nutritional benefits, because that's what Cadbury was building it on for years. It was about the taste and the fact that it had a glass and a half of milk. So they were saying that it was good. It was good for you, basically. That's what they were saying for a long time. They said that the new insight was that people use it as a pick-me-up. whether that's physical pick me up or an emotional pick me up. And so our ads have to align to that. Okay. So that's what I mean by an insight. And it's about the way that the people use the product. All right. So the insight is to do with some interesting, fresh way that the consumer feels about, thinks about, or uses the product, the competition, the brand category, or even thinks about themselves.
So it's like making the brand special and unique.
Yeah. Well, the insight has to be distinctive, and by thinking of the way that the insight is special, you'll marry that with what's special about the brand, and that becomes our next stage of the campaign.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. So, for example, the way we'd look at that with the bonds one is insight. Men, circumcised and uncircumcised men experience underwear differently. That's our insight. The brand truth of bonds is that it's about creating comfortable undies. That's it. It's all about comfort. That's the brand essence of bonds. You know, it's not really about fashionability or anything else. It's comfort. So they've come up with the idea, okay, now we'll make different types of underwear for the different types of men. So that's the brand growth idea that comes from that insight.
Yeah.
So the insight allows us to strategically think of something that is not yet being done in the market, or what's a way that we can get someone to think about our product in a way, or can we create a product that hasn't been done, but it has to be based on a truth that is from our consumer in some way.
Yeah.
Cool.
Thank you.
Good questions, Dickie. All right.
Shane, you've got quite a few questions in the chat as well.
Sure. Thank you for letting me know.
That's okay.
Well, it depends. So yeah, Rebecca, you should have social media listening. So that's fine as well. That's valid. Social media listening is completely fine. And when you say actual consumers, this is, you don't have to find someone who has firsthand experience of good beer company. You don't have to find a loyal consumer of them. You could find someone who likes craft beer, or someone who is socially minded and drinks beer of any kind. The idea is, how can you get that person to, what are their thoughts on, a socially philanthropic beer or craft beer, and how can you get into their heads that you could then apply that knowledge about that person to a campaign for the good beer company. But social media listening is absolutely fine as well. That counts as well. But ideally, yeah, if you could actually find some true primary research, have a chat to someone who might not be a consumer of good beer company, but they might be a consumer of beer or craft beer, or they might like alcohol, and care about social causes.
Okay, thank you. So we don't have to do the interview, but I can ask someone who's
you don't have to do an interview. You can do a focus group. You can do projective techniques. You can do whatever you like. But I want some form of primary research.
Okay, thank you.
Cool. Yeah, Anna, your question. Do you want us to talk about potential advertising ideas and strategies? That's more for the next assignment. But what I'd like you to do is, with your insight, kind of give it an indication of how it might be used. What is the significance of the insight, without getting too specific? So if you were doing the bonds one, you could say the insight, which I'm not going to go over again because I don't have to want to say those words again. And then say, it could be used to design comfy undies, something like that. That doesn't give us specifics about the campaign, but it you can tell us that, okay, well, the insight is to do with male comfort, and bonds is perfectly positioned to come up with a campaign or a product line based around comfort, based on the insight, something like that. Karen, when we research the industry that the brand occupies, do we focus on social enterprise or craft beer? Both. Because that's the two aspects of them. I think I answered that before. Cool. Quotes part of the word limit. Yeah, I generally, I've never really thought about that before. I don't, as I said before, I don't count words. If you're looking at your assignment and you've gone over by 5 or 10 pages, it's pretty obvious you've gone over the word limit. I wouldn't worry about that too much. I personally don't count quotes. I know you're right. Absolutely, some units are very sticklery for it. I personally don't count it. It's part of the word limit. Shah, your question there about the COVID-19. Yeah, I mean, the COVID campaign is just the latest beer. You know, they still are selling beers for, you know, drought relief and the Great Barrier Beer campaign. The next campaign will be for something completely different. So you might have a COVID-related idea, you know, a beer that helps us come out of isolation, or it's the next stage on from, you know, yeah, so it's still going to be very topical for a while. So there's nothing wrong with doing that, but you might identify something else that is not related to COVID. But certainly you might, in your research, realize that, you know, there's a whole world of anxieties and concerns that people have now. Timeframes, Taryn, and limitations of the secondary research. It's kind of just acknowledging, firstly, you know, if anything's kind of too old or out of date, and then limitations of the secondary research. Well, of course, it's the acknowledgement that it might not be qualitative. You know, you're only getting an objective perspective on, say, the industry rather than, you know, an insight into the actual target consumer. That's what I mean by that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Shah, your question again. Yeah, so again, you can analyze that part, but it doesn't have to all be about analyzing. You're looking at the brand, and the COVID-19 campaign is one aspect of them as well. It's a current campaign, but that's not what they're all about. They're not just a COVID beer. But yeah, you can certainly look at underlying trends amongst those beer drinkers and what are their current and perhaps future or imminent social concerns. You know, and in 1 year we've changed. You know, in 1 year we've gone from, I mean, this time last year was pretty much about the Great Barrier Beer. You know, the Great Barrier Reef beer, saving the reef. And then it became about the bushfires earlier this year. Now it's the COVID. Okay, so things change very rapidly. So it really is about what are people anxious about now? What needs love and attention now as far as social responsibility and causes. Sophie, how do we get in touch with consumers of this brand if you don't live in Australia? As I said, you don't have to get in touch with an actual consumer of the good beer company. Okay, it can be someone who drinks craft beer or drinks beer with a social responsibility in it. There's a fantastic campaign from Argentina called Naught Beer a few years ago, and it was, you know, the best excuse in the world campaign, and that was just about getting guys to drink more, and the more you drank, the better money the brewery would donate towards beautifying parks or cleaning up ponds and all this kind of stuff. So it was actually the idea was your partners would go from trying to stop you from drinking. Because as bad as this insight sounds, this is what it was based on. That they found that guys who like to party and drink, as soon as they got married or got girlfriends, they were putting the turning the tap off for them. So they were trying to get them to. They were trying to think of ways that they could drink more, but their partners would think they were great for drinking more. And so the more you drink of Naught, the more it was going to help, fix hospitals or fix roads and beautify ponds. So yeah, it was a great little campaign. How detailed should we explain our primary research methodology? Well, as I said, if you're doing an interview or focus group, when was it? How long did it take? Who are the participants? You don't have to give me their full names. And what I'm really concerned about is your key findings. So you need to summarize your key findings from your research. If you want to put it as an appendices, because I know a lot of that stuff takes up word count. If you want to put it as a raw data as appendices, a raw transcript, that's fine. But I'm more concerned about your key findings. Sales data, not necessarily. Tone and style. Well, this is the thing, Adrian. This is a good question. That's a very good question. If you want to read Adrian's question in chat there, it's a report style, and I've said this to a few people that I'm not overly prescriptive about structure and headings and all this kind of stuff, because the worst thing in the world is I don't want to read 80 assignments that all look like clones. You know, that bores me crapless. And it's the same in the industry. When a client sits down to read something, they don't want to just see, you know, cloned marketing report 101. Agencies go to a lot of trouble to make their presentations, their documentations readable, legible, good to read. So it doesn't have to be really dry. Invest a little bit of, you know, have fun with the writing of it. You know, you can get creative with headings if you like, as long as you kind of, you know, I get what you mean. As long as you've got those basics there. If there's an analysis of the current situation and the product, the consumer, the competitor, the brand category, you know, you've done some secondary and primary research into the consumer and you've come up with an insight, you know, be playful with the way you present it. There's nothing wrong with doing that. Does that answer your question, Adrian? Yeah, cool. Yeah, Tomcat, it can be, what I would suggest, your consumer insight should be a good sentence. Okay, so that's your insight, but you can expand on it and justify it in a paragraph after that. But yeah, your insight should be a really tight sentence, and then you can expand on that. Cool. All right, it's 8 o'clock. Excellent questions, everyone. Really good stuff. They were great questions. Okay, and as I said before, shoot me an email. Happy to answer any questions via that, and we can chat in the chat as well. So, yeah, good stuff. Good work. Catch you later.
Thank you.
No worries.
Okay.
Bye.
Thank you.
See ya.